rapidly in orbit.
What do UFOs, Mothman, time anomalies, and the creative process have in common? In this episode, I sit down with writer and podcaster Richard Hatem, best known for writing the Mothman Prophecies movie, as we explore the strange crossroads of the paranormal and the personal. From government secrecy and extraterrestrial encounters to the dual nature of reality itself, Richard shares how voices like John Keel and Whitley Strieber shaped his understanding of a world that refuses easy answers. And now, onto our interview with Richard Hatem. To start off, I'd like to ask you to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, the awesome projects you've worked on, and kind of how you got into writing.
Well, I got into in my memory, I would say I started writing in high school. You know, that's when I started writing television. Currently, I am a film and television writer and a podcaster. And, you know, I wrote my first TV script when I was in high school. I didn't sell it, but I was trying. But then I look back, you know, my dad sold his house. I got all this stuff, boxes and boxes of stuff that I had written as a very small child, like a little book I had published. So apparently I've been doing that forever. But yeah, the writing has always been, I think, the major expression of my artistic aesthetic, myself, my desire to communicate with the world. There's also been a little bit of acting, a little bit of stand-up comedy, but mostly the writing. And the writing's been going on professionally for 25 or 30 years. I wrote the Mothman Prophecies. I co-wrote Under Siege 2, Dark Territory, which many more people have seen, it feels like. And then various TV things. So, and now, of course, Richard Hatem's Paranormal Bookshelf, which is the podcast that I write. And that's where I talk about the paranormal books on my bookshelf and kind of what was happening in my life when I read the various books or what they connect to in my life. So it's a storytelling podcast, but, well, you know all about it, Dan. You've heard it.
Yeah, I might have heard an episode or two. I guess it's kind of what brought us together, right? I love your show, and I just want to take a beat to say happy 1 year anniversary. You just passed the 1 year anniversary. How does it feel a year in to reflect now and be like, okay, now I'm a podcaster. How did this go?
It feels great. I have been so lucky. So, you know, like you're a fan of Astonishing Legends, right?
Yes. Great podcast.
So, yeah, and that's the show that launched me. I'd been a guest with Scott and Forrest for like 7 years or something, just on and off, and had such a good time with them. And Scott was always telling me, hey, you got to start your own. You got to do a podcast. And of course, he was telling me, you know, back when, if I had started podcasting when he had told me to start podcasting, I would be doing even better than I'm doing now. But I waited just long enough for it to be an uphill climb. No, but seriously, launching off of their show has given me a huge boost. And so that's, you know, probably started doing it 2 years ago in terms of writing it, and then took almost a full year of writing, editing, recording, finding a composer, our composer Nima Kazaruni, who's fantastic, and kind of getting it all set up, getting all the social media set up, the website, and then launching. So when the first anniversary rolls around, it feels like, how could this only be 1 year? I feel like I've been doing this forever. But yeah, it's been 1 year, and I try to remind myself it's 1 year. And in the podcasting world, 1 year is like 1 week in any other endeavor. It's like, oh, 1 year. Well, tell me when you've been doing it for 10 years, and then let's see how you're doing at that point. So anyway, yeah, but it's great. The audience is great. The listeners are so involved, and I hear from them all the time. It's very rewarding. I kind of love to hear about your experience, but my experience has been the best. This is better than, because you do TV or movies, you may never hear about that. And within a half an hour of launching my first episode, people are writing to me, oh my God, this is amazing, your podcast. You know, how do you know my life? You know, people are like, we had the same childhood. Or, you know, oh my God, I'm going through that too. So the communication with the listeners is what makes it so compelling, because it's like you drop an episode and you hear immediately what people think. And I love that.
Yeah, well, I had a question kind of later on that touches a little bit on that difference between podcasting and, you know, the immediate feedback you get from that versus in the movie world where you know, I guess you write a script and it's almost a year or so before a film goes out and anyone sees what you've been working on, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, I would say now for TV writers and movie writers, in terms of audience feedback, it's probably the best it's ever been in history. Like when I think about the shows that I was watching in the 70s and 80s, I know the people who wrote those shows. And I'm talking about shows that I love, like the Rockford Files, or, I mean, all of you know, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the Bob Newhart Show, a lot of stuff from the 70s. And I know that those writers felt that they might as well have been writing their scripts and throwing them into a bonfire, because there was no way they knew, it's like, oh, okay, you know, this was our audience share. This is what the Nielsen ratings say. So they intellectually knew that millions of people were watching what they wrote, but there was no way for them to connect with those people. There was no internet. Maybe there'd be some letters. Maybe people would write. At that point, I don't even think people were aware that television shows were written. So I always feel bad for those people, because then a generation later, there's a whole generation of TV writers that are like, oh, I know your name, I know what you do, and you're the reason I'm doing what I do. Except we're doing it at a time when, through Facebook or Instagram or a million different ways, Twitter, people can reach out and go, oh, I saw your episode, you know? And what they're responding to, of course, like, if they're talking to me, for instance, my most recent show is Titans on HBO Max. And I'll write an episode, but I'm writing about these DC characters that people are very connected to. Beast Boy and Raven and, you know, Nightwing. And so when they're commenting, they're like, oh, you know, Nightwing would never do that or something. You know, they're like, they're responding to what the show is. And rarely are they saying, hey, Rich, nice job on the episode last night. I hear them reacting to the episode, but they're not reacting to me. And my voice is being filtered through whatever the show is. And so the big difference, of course, is, you know, my name is in the title of my podcast. So when they're responding to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that in a lot of ways, like you say, it can be a bad side of social media where, you know, when people don't like something, they have to direct connect to you, but also just the positive stuff that kind of comes from things that you put into the world. It's a really interesting effect that kind of writing or any creative endeavor kind of causes to happen, where, you know, the world talks back and the art talks back once it kind of hits a certain level out there.
Well, I feel good so far because the people, and it's been, you know, very few, which is nice because it does, you know, I mean, it does make you feel bad. But the people who have gotten in touch to tell me how much they don't like the show, at least they're not liking it for all the right reasons.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their comments are always like, oh, dude, all you do is, you know, who cares about you talking about your 7th grade girlfriend? You know? And I'm like, oh, well, okay. That's what the show is about. It's about me and my experiences and the books that I read and my opinions. So you hate it for the same reason other people love it. So I'm fine. No one is getting in touch and saying, you know, you profaned the God of my religion and I am declaring a death sentence. You know, there's no...
You're going to get one of those just this week now.
Yeah, based on this, right? Yeah. Yeah, no one has ever said something where I'm like, oh, you don't even know what I'm talking about. Except for the only person who religiously listens to the show and I actually think doesn't really get the show is my brother. But he listens because he's my brother and he supports me. But every time he listens, he always comes back to me later and says, yeah, I just don't get it. I don't understand. You had a worse childhood than I did. You're talking about things. That's not my experience at all. And I'm like, okay, thanks, man.
We should get both of you guys on Astonishing Legends, and you can both give your serial order of events, and Scott and Forrest can figure out what the real objective truth is, maybe.
Right.
That'd be fun. Okay, so now I guess I want to hear your, I guess we could call it a paranormal origin story. Like, how did you go from, dreaming of being a writer to suddenly, I want to kind of lean into the paranormal stuff more, that led you to writing something like the Mothman Prophecies?
Yeah, well, it is strange because that's always been an interest of mine. I've always been accumulating these books and hearing stories. I've always enjoyed it, but I never, like my earliest writing efforts for television and for film were not supernatural at all. It was either a thriller or I'd try to write a comedy or an action thing. For whatever reason, I guess I was sort of holding back a little bit. And it was only after I'd made some strides, Under Siege 2 had come out, I was having meetings, people were talking to me about what I wanted to talk about. And sort of in the mid-90s, a few things were happening. I was spending more time in New Mexico, if that's an excuse. And there's such an emphasis in like Santa Fe and Taos about sort of the spirit of the land. And it's a beautiful area. And every bookstore I went into, there were, stories and books about things that had happened in that area. Anyway, a lot of stuff was sort of coming together for me. And I was beginning to feel a bit more comfortable talking and writing about that stuff. And I was noticing that the books that I was reading about people who have had strange experiences, they never followed a traditional sort of film narrative. The middle of the story was the best part and the end wasn't, because the middle of the story, when a person is telling you about something that happened to them, they're telling you about the night they spent in a haunted hotel. And the middle of the story is, okay, so this happened, this happened, this happened. And then we went downstairs for breakfast, talked to the manager. He said, oh yeah, people have had weird experiences in the hotel. And we go, oh, that's amazing. And that's the end of the story. There's never any big conclusion. They don't discover, it doesn't lead to anything. But in movies, it always leads to something. It's always, well, the haunting begins, there's something strange, but then the plot takes over. And you realize, oh, it's a murder mystery, or, oh, we've got to, it's trying to kill us and we've got to destroy it. And those elements never happen in real life. I've never heard a story about people staying in a haunted hotel and it turns into a battle for their lives. So I'm like, is there a way to just do a movie where it's just the good middle part? And how can I tell a story like that where a person experiences the paranormal, but then just has to live with the mystery for the rest of their life? And there really were no books to adapt, but I'm telling you, it was within a month of that and that question forming in my mind that I found a copy of the Mothman Prophecies. And that book, I mean, not only is it chock full of strange, amazing things, but it's so cool because it's one of the few books where the strange stuff starts to happen to the author of the book as they're writing the book. So as John Keel was investigating, the various strange events in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the phenomenon began to notice that he was writing about it and keeping track of it. And so it got in touch with him. And he started getting strange phone calls in his motel room. And people would come up to him on the street and say, hey, when you called last night, you were so upset, and I'm just checking on you to see if you're okay. And he's like, I never called you last night. And they're like, what are you talking about? We were on the phone for half an hour and you were so upset and you just kept asking me what was happening in the town and why was it so strange? And he's like, okay, whoever you were talking to, it was not me. So really weird stuff started to happen to him. And I'm like, that's all really great. And then, of course, in the book and in real life, at the town of Point Pleasant, a bridge collapses. And in retrospect, a lot of people began to feel like sightings of Mothman, sightings of weird lights in the sky, weird precognitive dreams, poltergeist activity, men in black, all of it was a way for the universe to try to warn them that something was going to happen in their town. And that thing was the collapse of the bridge, in which many people who lived in that town died. I think there was over 40 people. And it's a small town. Everyone knew everyone on that bridge that night. And so reading that book and seeing a bit of a structure, I began to conceive of a way to write a story about how the paranormal affects normal people and how we integrate it into our lives as best we can.
When I saw that you'd adapted the movie, and then I was looking through your IMDb, and I couldn't see, a consistent kind of supernatural kind of tilt to your work, but that one stuck out like a sore thumb, Mothman Prophecies. And having read the book, I was like, why would you even try to tackle that book? That's kind of nuts, because you're right, it does get to the quality of that middle part of the story, but again, you get to the end of it and it's kind of like, it's romantic in a way, just trying to kind of go, look, the phenomena is real and it's real. There's magic in the world. And then the end is kind of like, it just stops because, there is no resolution. They don't find Mothman and arrest him for knocking a bridge over or something like that. It just,
right.
It just kind of stops. And for me, that ending kind of really, it almost passes the buck for the viewer to go out into the world and kind of try and experience some of these things for yourself. Were you ever tempted to kind of follow in John's footsteps as part of the writing process and visit Point Pleasant and go to all those places?
Early on in my 20s and 30s, I really wanted to have an experience. And the idea of just taking a year off and exploring was really appealing to me. Over the years, it has become less so. I'm in a place now where I really don't want to have an experience. I think, I think so many of those experiences leave people pretty destabilized. And look, I'm clinging to my stability with both hands. So, I wasn't tempted. And here's the funny thing, Dan, I've never been to Point Pleasant, ever. And then a couple of weeks ago, one of the organizers of the Mothman Festival reached out to me and invited me to participate in the festival and be a speaker. And it's so funny because I've wanted to do it for years. It's been going on for a long time. And I kept thinking, I'll do it this year, but I never could. And then this year he reached out and I'm like, okay, that does it. That's the sign. I'm doing it. So finally this year in September, I think it's like September 20th, the weekend of the 20th, that's the Mothman Festival in West Virginia. And for the first time ever, I will be there. So all these years later, I'll finally be in the town that started it all. I wrote that script 30 years ago. Wow. I mean, well, toward 28, so give or take a couple of years, and I always thought, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go. And I never went. And I'll finally go this year.
That kicks ass. I'm really glad you're going to get to go. And you'll get to witness they have a wonderful Mothman statue in the street. Have
you been there?
Sculpted. I have, yeah. Elena and I kind of went there. And yeah, the museum's incredible. And actually, while we're on the subject of the museum, I'll ask you. So when I went to the museum, there's a copy of the movie script in a kind of a glass casing. And on the back of it, there's a note that says, and it was a weird moment for me because it's addressed to Dan, and I was reading it and I was like, oh, I really want to know the answer to this, because someone had told me that there was something mysterious on the page. And so, yeah, I looked at it and it said, Dan, the answer to the secret of the universe is on page 173 or something like that. And I've seen a few people have copies of the Mothman Prophecies with things like that written in. And I've always wondered, was John Keel a bit of a joker? And that page was always blank because I couldn't get in the case to move it to look at the secret of the universe, you know?
That is so it's a note from John Keel, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, he was I've got books on my shelf right over there signed by him that, I handed him and said, Mr. Keel, while we were, when I was meeting him, and he knew that I was writing the script and that the movie was getting made, and everything in every one of those books is a joke, is his sense of humor. It's like, don't look behind you, they're coming.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, and he was a really interesting guy, but what drove people crazy is that he would go to these UFO conferences and stuff, and he would give a lecture and people would pack the halls because he'd been places and he had seen things, and they were waiting for an answer. And then he would get up there and he'd just start joking about stuff, and people got really pissed off because they're like, no, we want to know. We want you to tell us. It's so funny. It's like, that's what people want. It's just, no, tell us what to do. It's that weird cult thing. And he refused it. He's like, I'm not your cult leader. I had some experiences. I can't explain them. You should go out and have your experiences. Don't believe people who stand up in front of a crowd and tell you they've got the answers. Because that's where trouble comes from in our world history.
Yeah. And there's a website that kind of collects all of his kind of like note cards. And on the website, the subheading is John Keel, not an expert in anything. And I think that's a good approach, right? Especially in this subject where you never know whether someone's trying to sell you a t-shirt or an answer, and no one really knows what this is.
No, and it's tough. I mean, that's what made the movie a tough sell, is because even just for a Saturday night, people want to go to a movie and be told the end. It's like, oh, and then at the end, we got the answer. And so the story is concluded and we can all go out and, have a pizza. But because the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, is about one individual, John Klein, facing a mystery and going so far out on a limb trying to solve it for himself that he becomes blind to real life. He becomes obsessed. And it's really the answer of the movie at the end is that he's sort of brought back into the world and realizes, you can only go so far down that road. And pretty soon you're going to find yourself alone in a room with a gun. And whether it's aimed at you or someone else, that's not where you want to go. So it's time now to stop looking into the abyss and start hanging out with Laura Linney, which is the answer to a lot of things.
Yeah, it's so true. I love what you said about people, being reluctant to search out the experience, because so many people, I see it online all the time in the UFO community, they'll say, I want to, encounter a UFO, I want to be abducted. And the fun version of that is very different from the real life version of that, where it full on traumatizes people. John Mack found that people had PTSD to something. He never definitively said what it was, but they had a reaction to an event. And yeah, it's life-changing and not always in a positive way. Someone in the kind of more esoteric areas of the subject once said to me that in the occult, they have a rule, and that is that everyone wants to see the devil till he shows up. And so it's served me fairly well in the UFO world to be like, yeah, everyone wants to see UFO until they show up and they want to take your, DNA or whatever it is that they do.
Well, so my season 3 of my podcast is coming up later on in the spring. And I start with a 2-part sort of double episode focusing on Whitley Strieber's book, Communion.
Oh, cool.
And I remember reading that book soon after it came out, and I read it again recently to prepare for the episode. And Whitley Strieber is a guy, like, here's a person maybe unique among abductees who, once he began to understand what was happening, rather than crouching down and sort of going into the bunker and praying it didn't happen again, he decided, well, if it's happening, maybe I better lean into it. And he's one of the few people I know, if anyone, who then went out in the woods up at his cabin in upstate New York where the abductions were taking place and basically said, okay, I know what's happening now. It's percolated up in my conscious mind. You're out there. You want to talk? Let's talk. I'm inviting you. I'm here. So let's do this, which to me is terrifying, but he did it and they heard him and they continued to engage. Now I'll tell you though, decades later, as he's continuing to write about this stuff, he's very upfront about the fact that even approaching it from that angle for decades now, going on 40 years, it has not put him in a position of power with the visitors. The rules are still dictated by them. They can come in and out of our reality at will. He has not received a ton of answers, if any. He has not received a lot of cooperation. They have not rolled out the red carpet. It is still a very scary, frustrating, vexing, traumatizing experience for him. And I don't know. I kind of don't know what the final lesson we learn from that. I mean, when you're a guy as smart as Whitley Strieber and you have these experiences, and even you, after 40 years, cannot really provide us with the answers we're looking for, where are we? In terms of that question, I think we're kind of stuck.
I loved how John Keel would talk about a kind of a secret experiencer, that there's usually one person that the event was kind of almost seemed aimed at, and then everyone else was kind of a witness to that kind of taking place, and how he'd always find that one person, and it created his kind of, I guess, his informant network, I guess, from the paranormal side of things. He had mediums, he had UFO experiences, everything in between, channelers, and they'd all kind of give him the same messages in the book. That was the kind of one bit of weirdness that stood out to me, that kind of overlap between all the different facets of the paranormal. And Whitley Strieber kind of plugs into that same thing for me, where, he started talking about extraterrestrials, and that was early on. And now when you hear him talk, he talks about the afterlife, and that these beings are somewhere kind of almost more familiar to that term than extraterrestrial. So you've looked through so many different, authors and experiences and stuff like that in your life. And so I kind of want to ask you what you make of these findings. Do you have like an overarching idea or theory for the phenomena itself, or any kind of favorite ideas?
Well, so Dan, I mean, and I think I've told you this off air, I've never had a paranormal experience of my own. Nothing that I truly feel, counts. So any theories I have are purely that of the armchair parapsychologist. But I think what's so hard about it, and, I've had conversations with people recently, is that all of these things, I think ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs, all of this stuff, near-death experiences, everything. What's so difficult about them is that they're not entirely objective or subjective. They're not entirely physical or non-physical. And it would almost be easier if they were completely non-physical, because then you could say, okay, so this stuff, is in a more etheric realm that some people can sometimes tap into. Or if it was completely physical, if there was, if someone went out and found a dead Bigfoot body or a live Bigfoot body, but at least bring it back and there it is. The people who are interested in disclosure, who honestly think that there are physical craft being hidden in military bases across America. And why it's only America, I've never understood. They don't seem to be interested in what other countries might have. But it's always, well, America has the answer. The American government made a treaty with the aliens, and there's an alien body in America. It's like, well, what about Russia and China and South America and Europe? Nothing going on there? But okay, whatever. The problem seems to be that it's both. That the phenomenon, again, whether it's cryptozoological or spiritual or ufological, it's both physical and non-physical. And that makes it really, really hard because there is no metaphor. There's nothing that you can say. It's like, well, it's physical sometimes and non-physical, and it can travel in and out of physicality, like blank. Well, there really is no blank. There's nothing else in our lives that people can go, oh, I get it. I see. It's like that other thing. It isn't. But, ghosts are non-physical. You might see one or hear one, but then it's also physical when it's a poltergeist. And Bigfoot is very physical when he's leaving tracks, but then very non-physical when you try to photograph him or get a hair sample. And UFOs are physical when your eyes are burned because you looked at them and now you've got a sunburn on half of your face like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters. And it's physical when you can see the indentations in the ground in the farm where the UFO landed, but then it's not physical because it disappears and there's no physical proof left behind and the pictures are blurry. So all of these things have dual qualities that in our world that we occupy, we struggle with because we can't pin it down. And we are a Western culture, and we are predominantly a materialist culture that believes that science measures reality in all its aspects. But it doesn't. There are many things in our reality that science is simply not a good tool to use to measure it. Our emotions, our memories, our responses to creativity. These are things that science can approach, but not as accurately as it can things that are fed, beneath a microscope and examined in that way. So we're kind of left in this unending loop of physical, non-physical, physical, non-physical. And I'm not sure when or if we'll ever get out of that loop.
Yeah, it's, whether we're looking at the work of Vallée, Keel, whoever, they all kind of come down on the side of eventually moving away from that extraterrestrial hypothesis to kind of be like, no, that doesn't fit the data. Like, it might fit some of these encounters, but the there and not there aspect of things, if it's a ship from another planet, great, that's what it is. But this seems to go beyond that. There are other mysteries here that just saying ET doesn't solve. That's not an answer. I pulled a quote from Keel. I forget which book it was, but he says, I abandoned the extraterrestrial hypothesis in 1967 when my own field investigations disclosed on an astonishing overlap between psychic phenomena and UFOs. The objects and apparitions do not necessarily originate on another planet and may not even exist as permanent constructions of matter. It's more likely that we see what we want to see and interpret such visions according to our contemporary beliefs. And that's interesting because it seems almost like a reflective phenomena, right? It sees us, it changes to blend in.
Right. Well, I mean, that quote you just read kind of encapsulates everything. His ultra-terrestrial theory that
yes,
this is all Earth-based. And I think there's something to that. It's strange. You'll hear stories about like little chunks of space rocks, hitting various places, little meteors and asteroids, and some of them are huge and some are just very small. But But, they land everywhere. They don't just, they're from outer space, they're physical, but they land everywhere. The government does not have a monopoly on where they're going to, or some knowledge of where they're going to land, or an ability to get there sooner than someone who is not affiliated with the government. And I always think about that when I think about, the government has crashed discs and, alien bodies, everything that the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, suggests. And yet I keep thinking, well, if a UFO is going to crash, it could crash anywhere. It could crash in Disneyland. It could crash in during the Rose Parade. It could crash in a place where many regular civilians would see it and be able to experience it. So where and how are all these UFOs ending up in the possession of the military and the government? And then the suggestion that the aliens themselves prefer to deal with government people is so mind-bendingly absurd and borderline insane.
Well, it's kind of, I think the same with this kind of stuff. If you're coming to this planet, if we just go with the nice straightforward extraterrestrial hypothesis, there's life out there, it comes here, it's not going to see our borders. It's not going to look for the White House or 10 Downing Street. It's just going to go to the first person it sees and tries to interact with them. And I'm aware that even when I say that, that's kind of a very human perspective assumption of what another life form will do.
Well, that's like assuming that if you or I walk into a field of cattle, our first thought is going to be, well, where's the head cow?
Yes.
Let me speak to him, and then we'll get back to you. It's like they're advanced. If they're able to come here, and everything we've heard about them is that they're in control. So why they're going to be impressed by the mayor of the town or the president of the country, it makes no sense. Now, it makes us feel a lot better. There's probably a lot of people out there whose entire conception of the world is that, well, we're just normal people and the government knows better than us. And of course, those people are always sort of like, well, the government's stupid and nothing works, but they're better than us. And they know all these secrets and they've got this stuff that maybe one day they'll tell us about. And why, again, it literally makes no sense.
Kind of like Schrödinger's government. They're both incompetent and running all things behind the scenes. And kind of can't have one without the other. It's a strange one. Your point about meteors made me think of Charles Fort in the Book of the Damned. He wrote that there was a scientist in France before meteors were discovered who famously declared, he was head of the Astronomical Society in Paris, and he declared, well, there are no rocks in the sky, therefore rocks can't fall from the sky. So that's what science thought of meteors that are now so commonplace. I'm fairly sure I got one, in the house kind of thing. And just to think, you could take that back 200 years and people would have fights over what it was, just like we do with the UFO stuff now.
Yeah, well, we're still trying to figure it out. There's so much we're trying to figure out. And I feel like you'll get much more out of the search if you're not focused so much on a destination or arriving at an answer in your own lifetime that's going to satisfy you. If you're willing to just engage in the process of speculation and research and have fun while you're doing it and enjoy the question, you're going to come away from your experience with the supernatural, I think, far richer than if you're just constantly looking for proof. Because A, proof is hard to come by, and B, when people do come by something they think of as proof, I don't know how much that satisfies. I don't know if they walk away feeling more secure in their life, Yeah,
it almost became a trope in the X-Files, didn't it? The Mulder would find his proof, and it would just end up being him sat alone in his apartment with a gun, funnily enough. So Keel's work, it returns to the idea of things come in through time, maybe. And he explains it. I'd recommend people go read his books, but there's one phrase that keeps coming up when he talks to experiences, which is they say they were asked, what is your time cycle, by the beings kind of coming from, wherever they're coming from. So what is your time cycle? What do you think that means? Like when you read Keel, what does that set off in your head?
The time stuff is the scariest stuff. That to me is scarier than Bigfoot or ghosts. This notion that we don't understand time and that time does not necessarily, or we have a limited understanding. Because the minute you start talking about time anomalies, precognition, precognitive dreams, things like that, it immediately almost becomes physically repellent because it contradicts our notion of free will. If a person is able to have an accurate dream or prediction of a future event that does come to pass, where does our free will work in that? And then, because it's implying that, oh, everything is sort of predetermined, and so now it's just a matter of getting a glimpse at what's coming next on the next page. And if everything's been predetermined, who is it being predetermined by? And all of these things really mess with certainly my, notions of autonomy, free will, or even sort of, human, supremacy upon the earth. It's like, maybe we're not. And of course, when people talk about their experiences with aliens, visitors, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, it certainly does imply that there are intelligences far above us that sometimes make their presence known. And very few people come away from those experiences feeling great. They use phrases like, that thing looked at me like I was food, or, it looked upon me as we look upon insects, as something so far below it as to be inconsequential. And that, look, everyone knows I've got an ego, but we all do to a certain extent. We all almost need that to go through our lives and operate successfully and have a job and conduct relationships. If you spend too much time thinking about the fact that maybe we are cattle to another race of beings, that's not going to make your weekend go really great.
No, it'll keep you up at night. And I always think even the abductees who kind of come back and say, I had a great experience. Like Travis Walton being one of them, his experience wasn't too bad, all things considered, even though the movie of Fire in the Sky terrified me when I was channel surfing as a kid, but that wasn't an accurate movie. So, yeah. I was very relieved to find out it was better. But I often think, if they're so advanced that they're coming here doing X, Y, and Z and can change their appearances depending on who sees them and, what the cultural touchstones are, then there's every reason to think that they could just give me a drug that would make me feel positive about the experience and then put me back. I'm sure we do similar things to animals, right?
Yeah, I wish all the aliens did that. I wish, then it'd be great, I mean, and I always compare it to the near-death experience where, overwhelmingly people come back from that feeling really good and like, oh, wow, I got a glimpse into what happens next and it's good. So you're good. Don't need to worry about dying. I mean, I don't want to be in pain, but, it's all going to work out in the end. So I prefer to listen to that. I mean, look, we are in control of so little. We're worldwide, I think, in an era of feeling fairly out of control of what is happening and how we're going to, sort of survive. And it's funny because we all grow up with a feeling like, well, once we're older and we become grown-ups, we'll determine the direction of, humanity. And it's going to be good. And I don't think very few people who get into their 60s and 70s and 80s, I think very few of them feel like, yep, we did it. We have arrived. It's awesome. And that's, why we get so upset when the kids walk on our lawns. It's like, God, can't I control anything? And what I found useful nowadays is to really sort of, I kind of call it, I sort of bring my personal ceiling down a little bit. And I worry a little less about, okay, here's how I'm going to make sure the world works out before I die. Now I'm sort of like, well, let me just kind of focus on the people I know and the things I'm doing and trying to see if I can nail that a little bit. And don't get so worked up. But it's tough now because we live in a world where we're getting transmissions from every spot on the earth 24 hours a day. I mean, you can use the internet to injure yourself all day and all night. And a lot of people do. And they feel that, well, no, I've got to keep up with events. But do you? Because what you're keeping up with actually are transmissions that are designed to provoke emotions in you. And typically the emotions of anger and fear, because that's what's going to get you to continue clicking and then ultimately buying something online, which is what the whole point is to sell you a thing. I teach a TV class at UCLA, and the students are always amazed when I explain to them, television has always been about the commercials. It's not about the shows. We think it's about the shows, but it isn't. It's a device to deliver advertising to you. And the shows are just there to get you from one bit of advertising to the next. And it's the same thing with all social media and all news, certainly. I mean, news isn't what it used to be. It's simply designed to keep you engaged long enough to eventually spend some money that will enrich someone else. And that's where we are right now. And no one's happy about it. No one's having a good time online. You have to really curate your experience carefully and then get out. Because seriously, and I've done that. I've backed off to a large extent. And guess what? My life is better.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of addiction for people. And I know that word is thrown around a lot, but I think it's true. It's designed to keep you going back. It's designed to give you those hits and to just wanting to be plugged in 24/7. And I don't think we were built for it either. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting.
Well, what I found is now that I've disengaged, it's okay. I wasn't controlling the world. And now I've accepted that.
I mean, that's good to know, isn't it?
Yeah, I've taken my hands off the wheel. I've fallen asleep at the wheel, and the car hasn't completely crashed yet. And I have a feeling that even if I was paying attention, it would not affect the trajectory of the car. And it doesn't matter anyway, because I'm still gonna die. And I couldn't be more excited.
That's great. Like darkly real, but really positive outcomes. What it was. You talking about advertising and kind of it selling a specific thing to kind of, pull you in. It makes me think of, when we were talking about Keel, one of Keel's theories was that the UFO phenomena was kind of it could be a class designed to kind of, pull you to the brink. And if you can handle it, you'll get the next step. And, I'd be disappointed if at the end of all those steps, they were just trying to sell me something, just from the whole planet. But I think it's an intriguing idea because, you mix in the time aspects with it that Keel wrote about. And we essentially have a situation where things from outside of our notion of time trying to make us a certain way. And I wonder if something like that could be a reason for the secrecy around UFOs that we kind of, see throughout history, whether they have a UFO stored in a hangar or they just have a couple of videos of them. I think it's clear that the DoD don't play ball very well, or the Air Force don't play ball with transparency around these issues. And it kind of stokes these conspiracy theories. But it always gets me thinking, well, why would they keep it a secret? And to stop a certain future coming to pass that someone else was trying to draw them towards. Very Skynet, I guess, but I'm like, okay, that kind of gets scary. I could see why you don't want us to know that, you know?
Well, I always feel that the most likely answer is that, you know, when you're running something, you feel a certain responsibility. Like you fall into a role. Look, I'll cut to the chase. If you're a government and there are things going on that you cannot control, that does not give people confidence in you. So you have to imply that, oh, it's all under control. We know what we're doing. We know all about that. You know, the things that are going on in other countries, we know all about it. Even if you're just talking about intelligence, just for other human beings on Earth, there's always been a sort of myth that our country and other countries' intelligence organizations have a structure that works and they really know what's going on. And that makes us feel better. It's like, oh, okay, so someone is out there and they know what's going on. And if something bad is coming, they'll be the first to know and they'll let our government know and then we'll be made safe. But then things happen all the time that our own intelligence never saw coming. The Berlin Wall coming down, you know, no one saw it coming. There's a lot of, 9/11, they didn't see it coming. That's where you get the conspiracy theories, because it's like, but they must have seen it coming because I believe that narrative. I believe the narrative that someone knows what's going on. I don't, but somebody must, because Jesus, if they don't, then what the fuck? And that's where you begin going, well, oh, okay, here's what really happened. Of course they knew about it because they planned it. And then you start going down that road. And somehow for people, that's reassuring. Because it's like, well, I'd rather feel like the American government planned it, because that still puts us in control of it. And they must have had their reasons, and we can come up with those too. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know what's coming in our own lives or in the life of the planet. And we're more or less moving our way through blindly, but again, and not to be grim, but ultimately the end for each one of us as individuals is very clear. And so in a way that makes it a lot easier. You know the people you know what you love, you know what you care about. So just deal with things on that level. The people who say they can talk to the other side certainly back up that theory. They're like, yeah, just deal with the people you know. Live your life. Interact with people, have emotional experiences, and then die. And then we'll show you what happened in your life review, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll send you back to Earth. Good luck.
So with, I guess we touched a little bit on disclosure, but I wanted to ask you, like, how closely do you follow UFO events in the news? Like, did you watch the UFO hearings that have just gone?
No. I'm aware of them, but I don't follow them.
Okay.
I don't, yeah.
That's okay. I always find it interesting to ask, because I'll go to, UFO conventions and mention the Tic Tac UFO, for example. And so many people at a UFO convention will say to me, well, what's the Tic Tac? And then I'll tell them the story of, David Fravor. But I think there's this sense in the community that if you know UFOs, you know all UFOs, and I don't think that's true. Some people casually kind of pay attention, like you were saying.
Well, some people like them aesthetically. They just like thinking about, mysterious things, and that's great. I always assumed, I think that people who are consumed with notions of disclosure, they really do follow things very closely. And again, my assumption is that that is the majority of people who are self-identified, interested in UFO people, that they're interested because they think that these are physical beings from physical planets in physical craft, and literally we're just hours away at any moment of having it burst forth into our collective material reality understanding of the way the world is. I mean, pretty soon we're just going to know. And I can see why people feel that way, because that's certainly, it's in line with what we've experienced as human beings in our own history. Groups go and impose themselves on other groups who may not be ready for it. And that we get, no matter what side you're on. But I have talked to people. I don't know if you heard that interview I did with Farah Erdozu, who wrote...
Yes, I did. Yeah.
She was so great because she's like, really being interested in UFOs and, disclosure and all that stuff, that's kind of for rich white people. There's a lot of people in the world, women who are just, their big worry is, how am I going to feed my children? Because, daddy took the high road, and I'm just trying to get through the end of the day and keep the kids alive. So I'm not really thinking about UFOs and government conspiracies. And it's so strange, because you realize, oh, right. Like even in the world of the esoteric, we're getting a very Western American, and, you and I are getting a straight white man sort of view of things. Why are there, go to those UFO conventions and count the people of color. Ain't gonna be much. And then count the guys compared to the girls. And you're going to get a real view of who's into the UFO thing. Then go across the street to the witch convention and do the same experiment. And you're going to realize, oh, these are all culturally determined things. Certain people are more interested in certain things and certain ways into the esoteric. And that's still only right here in the big cities of America. I honestly don't know what's going on in Europe. Certainly don't know what's going on in Asia or South America, and the relationship that other cultures that are existing right now have toward the supernatural. And we've had the internet for 25, 30 years. Shouldn't we have a deep understanding of how people in Japan feel about UFOs? And yet I couldn't tell you.
That's such a good point. Like you said, it's kind of Western centric. And, I mentioned to you, I went to Colombia to make a UFO documentary, and we called them UFOs. The locals would call them ancestor lights. They saw them as the spirits of, people that had passed that they loved coming back to see them. And it's that kind of, every place, every culture is going to have a different name and a different way of talking about these kind of anomalous events. And unless we line all those up and kind of go, oh, that description that you're saying there looks like what we call this, then we're working with an incomplete data pile, really. Yeah.
Yeah, there's these books by an author. Her name is Artie Sixkiller Clark. And she's done extensive interviews with people of Native American descent in America and also Central America. And the way they talk about UFO experiences, for want of a better term, is very different. And it's like what you said. They feel much more that they're being visited by ancestors, which already then halfway makes it feel like they're talking about ghosts.
Sure.
But that's how they see it. And they're like, oh, these are the people who brought us here, and they have a whole understanding. And again, if you take a step backward from that, grasping for the final answer, and you just go, well, now, wait a second. Now, what does it feel like to think of it that way? You're familiar with the author, Joshua Cutchin, right?
Yes.
Well, what's great about his stuff is that he's looking at the same things we've always looked at, but he's looking at it from a very particular angle. It's just like, I'm going to talk about UFOs, but only in terms of the food or the other things they give people to eat during a close encounter. And then I'm going to do one about how UFOs smell. And then I'm going to do one about, and it's like, whoa, it's like by looking at it from just a very specific angle, it's like a kaleidoscope. It just turns everything. You're like, whoa, maybe the answer will be found there, or at least it gives you a new question to ask. And that's why I think his books are so fascinating. And that's why I'm so curious as to what people from other cultures how they integrate this stuff into their lives, to what degree they're even interested in it. Because it's a human problem. We're all human beings on this planet. And anything we're dealing with, everyone's dealing with a version of it. So what do they make of it?
I love that. I think we could all do better being more open to the rest of the world when it comes to this. What you said about like listening to experience as well. Like I was reading a story from one of the archaeologists that kind of basically uncovered the big Maui statues on Easter Island that everyone kind of knows them for. Well, the peoples that put them in place, when they were asked like, oh, how did you move that from there to here? Because that's quite a distance and you don't have a wheel. They said, oh, the statues walk. And the archaeologists obviously laughed that off and kind of just went, of course they don't walk, they're statues. But they've since found that actually they would rock these statues back and forth using ropes, edging them forward one side at a time, where it kind of looked like they were walking. So the accurate description, though it sounds kind of dreamy, was actually the correct description. And we just kind of had to interpret it through how we see the world. And we were like, well, it's impossible for rocks to walk, so that doesn't make sense. So this really, age-old mystery that actually was solved very simply by listening to people who were local to these phenomena.
Yeah, it is funny how there's sometimes, well, you either look at traditional cultures as being, for want of a better word, dumber than us. And then it feels like, well, the only other alternative to that is, no, they were far advanced and, it's all been lost, in the island of Atlantis. But, all I care about personally is how good a time I am having at any given moment in the day. And then I think, well, there's been tremendous advances in medicine and technology and science over the last 200, 300 years. And, is it making me have more fun than if I was living in, the 1600s? And, yes, because those people might have had horrible diseases, or if they got injured, those injuries would be with them the rest of their lives. So their advances do make us enjoy the world more. But ultimately, do they? I mean, I could be happy going and seeing a Shakespeare play and then talking about that. There weren't podcasts back then, but you could sit in a pub and certainly people could throw their opinions around. People talk about going on vacation and it's like, well, what do you want to do? And it's like, oh my God, I'm in New York City and the traffic and the things, the noise. And I just want to go to Hawaii or go to the Caribbean and lie on a beach and just stare at the ocean and have a drink. And it's like, well, isn't that what people did in the past before there was so a New York City? They were already doing it. They were already doing what we want to do. We want to go to a bed and breakfast in the woods and disconnect. And it's like, well, people were disconnected. That's what they did. They sat out on their porch at night and had some moonshine and told stories. And now we're just doing the same thing, except in a podcast. Dan, you talking about walking on the beach at night, staring at the ocean and the sky and listening to paranormal podcasts, storytelling, whatever it may be. And I think everyone who hears you talk about that thinks that sounds like heaven. And man, you could have done that 1,000 years ago, except instead of earbuds, there'd have to be, a shaman telling you a story.
That's really true. Yeah, when everything kind of gets stripped away, we all want the same things. So do you think we've spoken about government and whether we trust government kind of with, the UFO secret or any secrets around the paranormal. So if they, for example, if you were the guy kind of solving the problem, like we've just found out we've got aliens, how do we tell the world this? In this day and age, I feel like almost the president standing on a podium might not be enough for some people to convince them. So what would you need as a person to see an announcement like that and to go, okay, cool, that's the exact truth that we're getting there?
You bring up a great point. I don't know if I could. I don't know if something on that level could ever, it's so strange. they could say it. I could see something, but how do you know what you're seeing? And what is the reasoning being given? I mean, look, in America, we've gone over the falls. Things that were just assumed about our government and what we wanted from a politician have been so thoroughly thrown in a dumpster that there is no shared reality anymore. There just isn't. It's just in the moment, you're into this or you're into that. So what's going to happen? Okay, well, here we are. Here are the alien bodies. I think most of us would just sit back and absorb it like we do all news as entertainment. We just go, okay, well, I still have to go to work tomorrow and those UFOs are cool, but my wife just left me and I've got to figure out what to do about the kids. That's why it interests me so little. It's not only that I don't believe they have an answer, but you're right. I don't believe that any way of communicating their answer would be something that anyone could or even should believe, because so much of what we're receiving is being designed for a reason, and it's usually someone else's benefit, not ours.
Only a few more questions left for you now. So a standout event in paranormal history for you, what is that event?
Long silence.
That's all good.
Look, there's a bunch, but they're only significant because of the. Oh, okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you one. The Patterson-Gimlin film. Okay, here's why. Here's why I find it to be such a fun Rubik's Cube of a paranormal event. There are people who think it's a guy in a suit, but it's very, very difficult. In fact, no one has ever been able to go back and say, okay, in 1967, here was the state-of-the-art suit that was being used. Or can point to something in media, a movie or a TV show, where a suit like that was present and could be filmed in daylight outdoors for more than 2 seconds before you go, that's a guy in a suit. Anthropologists, zoologists have examined the film and said, it is not obvious to me that this is not a living creature of some sort. I don't know what it is, but I cannot point to you and definitively say, here's why it is fake. And frankly, the more people look at it, the harder it is for them to go, this is 100% faked. But at the same time, how could it possibly be real? What is that thing? Where are the others? Why did we get such good coverage of it? And over the past 50 years, the more technology we have to apply to that strip of film, it has not illuminated it at all. They've frozen the image. It's not like, oh, well, we finally have the technology to prove exactly why this is stupid and bullshit. And all the debunkers in the world are constantly going, oh, no, I know the guy who did that. And, the filmmaker John Landis apparently, oh, I know the guy who has the suit. But here's the thing. If it was a suit and that suit exists in real life, it feels like that's the shortest distance between us and an answer, and no one's ever shown us the suit. Everyone knows a guy. Just show us the fucking suit. Or even better, today, with our technology in 2025, recreate the film. And we still can't do it. So to me, that makes the Patterson-Gimlin film such a fun sort of problem to throw our brains at. And if you're really being honest about it, and you're not far on one side or far on the other, you realize that it has not sufficiently been explained. So I'll say the Patterson-Gimlin film.
That's a really good answer. And I love that one because you're spot on. The further my initial reaction to it was, well, if a video of Bigfoot existed, I would have heard about it before now, as that approach. And I was like, well, no, that's driven by ego and self-centeredness. Like, of course, that's not true. But then years later, I dived into it along with the Astonishing Legends kind of 6-part series I think they did on it, where they're talking to the guy who's collecting the original film strips so he can like scan each individual frame. There are differences in all of these different film strips because of the chemical processing, even down to the fact that if you go now and Google this Patterson-Gimlin film, then you'll end up at kind of a recreation on YouTube where the software has uploaded so many frames for itself because the frame rate won't match that YouTube uses. You're not even watching probably like a 60% real video. Most of those frames are going to be made up by the software, making it 24 frames per second instead of 15 or whatever it was in the camera they were using. So there's so much technical knowledge that goes behind being able to say, we don't know what it is. And that's an okay answer to give as well with paranormal stuff, to just say, I don't know, because many people no one knows as far as I can tell.
No. And we use the supernatural and we use the paranormal as a Rorschach to address questions of our own existence. I mean, these are all existential questions. And we are all, to one degree or another, preoccupied with not only what happens to us after we die, but why we're here at all. There really is no satisfying, even if you go completely materialist, there is no satisfying answer. If someone just says, no, there's no God, there is no creator, all of this is just a biological accident, matter floating through space, none of that answers how did the space get here and why?
I want that on a t-shirt. It's the ultimate question, right? How did space get here and why?
And ultimately it's like the line from Annie Hall when the child version of Woody Allen, his mother is bringing him to like a psychologist, and she's like, he keeps asking these questions. It makes no sense. And the little kid Woody Allen is like, nothing matters. The earth is going to fly into the sun and be destroyed in 1 billion years. Nothing matters. And his mother is like, what business is that of yours? But it's so true. It's like, ultimately, what business is it of ours outside of fun late night conversations with people we care about, or even in the middle of the day like this one? It doesn't ultimately matter. We'll find out. We'll all find out.
If you had to recommend one book or film or TV show based on the paranormal or supernatural, and that could be the unusual things as well, what would you recommend?
I'd recommend Richard Hatem's Paranormal Bookshelf, the most fascinating podcast to come along in the last 1 year.
Nice. I like the plug. And I genuinely do recommend all the listeners of this go listen to Richard's podcast. Go on.
Well, look, I mean, yes, definitely listen to the podcast. But also, obviously, I should give you a good answer. So the good, I'll give you a 2. I'll give you an older book, which is Siren Call of the Hungry Ghosts. I did an episode on Astonishing Legends with Scott and Forrest about that. I may do one of my own for my podcast coming up. It's a fun, fascinating book that brings up a lot of questions. Then it's unlike a lot of books I've ever read. So I would say check out the Siren Call of the Hungry Ghosts. That's one. And then for a newer book, one that I just read that I really ended up enjoying even more than I thought I would is Stanley Milford's book, The Paranormal Rangers. And it's about his work on the on the reservation in the Southwest, being part of a law enforcement unit that responds to claims of the paranormal, which in his community is taken very seriously. And it could be anything from Bigfoot to ghosts to poltergeists to UFOs. And that's another one of those books where he's like, look, I always held that this stuff could be real. But when I went on the job, I had experiences with each of these things that has convinced me that they are more real than I ever thought. I mean, this is a book that really pays off. You know, and for a while you're like, well, okay, this, you know, but in the second half of the book, it's like, oh, damn, he's having all kinds of experiences. So it's really, really fascinating. So I would definitely recommend that.
The two great recommendations. I haven't actually heard of the second one, but I smell a TV show potentially in his future as well.
Oh, hey, you never know.
Okay, so just to wrap up, we have some, I guess, listener questions, but they're not attributed to people. I just kind of said, hey, I'm talking to Richard. And they were like, who's Richard?
Oh,
and I said, you know, Richard Gere, Mothman Prophecies. And
you're talking to Richard Gere? Great. Here's my question.
My mum had no clue until I said, you know, the one with Richard Gere. She was like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was really scary. And I was expecting a romance.
Well, it's there. You know, if you want it, it's there.
So one of them is, where can your ideas come from? And I guess this is getting towards, you know, when you feel inspiration, where do you find it most?
Well, that's interesting because it's not necessarily where do the ideas come from, but what do you do to put yourself in a receptive place for those ideas? It's really difficult because it's difficult. It's different for every person. There are people, and I know them, other writers and artists who wake up every day just that there's not enough lifetimes to write all the books. And I am not that way. I have had like 3 ideas in my entire life. And everything else has just been, well, if I sort of add that to this, maybe I could sort of come up with something. So it's really difficult. But what I will say is this: if you're a creative person and you're trying to get into a creative practice, I can definitely recommend starting with a physical environment in which you can be uninterrupted. And in that physical environment, make it as conducive to what you love as you possibly can. Fill it with art, fill it with music, fill it with all of your favorite toys and things that make you feel like you, without judgment, books, everything. Create your little physical environment and then place yourself in that environment with the intention of doing creative work, not necessarily every day, but on a consistent schedule. If it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m, great. If it's 5 nights a week at midnight, fine. But make it regular, because what you'll do is by doing that, you almost like working out, you train your mind to access and allow creative thoughts to come through, which is basically your muse. But it's that quiet, timid part of your brain that doesn't feel safe necessarily, and that always feels beaten down by the other part of your brain that's going, that's a dumb idea. You'll never sell it. No one cares about you. This will never work. You're not good enough. Everyone's got that voice, especially when it comes time to try to express yourself creatively. But if you have a regular routine, you will find that judgment voice will take some time off. And then the other voice, like a fox in the woods, will slowly come further and further out from the trees and engage with you in an open area. And that's your creativity. That's your muse. That's your soul, whatever you want to call it. And after a little while, it gets easier and easier. And then you can access that creative place and you can, you'll be surprised at what happens.
Very, very poetically put. I love that. Thank you. And to kind of bolt onto that, what would be some of the best advice you could give writers or people to looking into breaking into writing, you know, in the movie industry, TV industry, after you've, you know, the creative bits happened, you've written your script. what would be the next best step that someone could take?
Okay, there are steps you can take. They're not, there's no, hey, we're the script, emporium. Send us your script and we'll get it to Hollywood. But go online. I'm going to speak to people who are writing TV pilots, okay, and feature films. That's my area, and if that's the only area I have any familiarity with at all, go online and go to the various television networks and the various movie studios that you know of, and go to their websites and look for fellowships, internships, work, not really work study, but almost all of them offer a kind of outreach, which involves, hey, send us samples of your work. We will select 12 people a year and we'll put them into a program where we interact with them and we sort of help mentor and foster them along in their creative pursuits. Look up contests. I mean, the internet is a great resource for this because you can find it. It's fairly easy. You can do it in an hour. So internships, fellowships, contests, they're all out there. And most of them don't charge any money. I would, of course, say, try to be smart and don't spend money you don't have, but take advantage of that. And if you really want to be in that industry, I would also say it does help to be in Los Angeles and to go to screenings and meet people and have fun and meet the people who are interested in the things you're interested in. And you do that in public places where, the Writers Guild, when they're having screenings or events, and at various revival theaters or new theaters, and just take classes. You're going to meet people physically in those physical classes, like the ones that I teach. And those people will share with you their successes. And you're going to meet those people, and pretty soon you will find pathways forward. Inevitably, that's how it happens. It doesn't happen because Steven Spielberg just met you one day at a Burger King and said, you're going to be famous. Yeah, it's peers. It's your peers who are at your level, and you'll help each other, and you'll slowly matriculate upward in the field of your choice.
That's kind of nice as well, because it's kind of like the world, right? If you all help each other, you all end up in a better place. So
yeah. And I would say that nowadays, the young people coming up are much more about that. When I was coming up, I saw everybody as competition, and I was very wary of anyone. And that wasn't a great way to be. And even with that wariness, the only way I got ahead was ultimately the times that I did team up with people who are my age, who are my friends, and we found our way forward. So I have a lot of confidence in every new generation, because with all the challenges, great stuff is still out there, and it's happening every day. Cool movies in every genre, TV shows, and even YouTube content, when it's, there are creative people out there saying, here's my thing, and they're putting it out there. So there's ways to find it. Whether or not you become a multimillionaire, I don't know. But if you want to share your creative vision, there are ways now, and thank God, because there's great stuff now.
This one's from Elena. Are you going to do an episode of your show on the vertical plane?
Oh, is that a request? Here, let me write that down.
It might well be a request, yeah. Elena actually showed me the book, one of the first things we ever talked about. And I read the book and chewed through it very quickly because it's just an incredible story.
It's so great. It's so great. Yeah, I might. It's funny. I when I talk to Scott and Forrest, I'm like, well, I can't do this book because we talked about it. And I can't do that book because we talked about it. And Scott is like, you can still do it. Not everyone's heard that episode. Not everyone who's heard that episode doesn't want to hear another take on it. And your take is going to be different because your podcast is different. And I'm like, you know what? That's true. So I'm trying, in the first 3 or so seasons, maybe 4 seasons, I'm trying to do books no one's ever heard about, or a lot of people haven't heard about, or I've never talked about before. But but I may come around because those are some of the best books. Siren Call of the Hungry Ghosts, The Vertical Plane. Those are fun ones. And so, yeah, that tell Elena there's a good chance Vertical Plane will find its way into Richard Hatem's paranormal bookshelf.
Awesome. She'll be very happy about that. Then this one's from me. My favorite episode of series 1 of your show was the Ted Sirios one. I'd never heard his story before, and I just thought it's such an incredible story that I don't know why it's not a movie yet. So I always envision it as like this kind of almost, oh brother, where art thou kind of vibe. Just really over the top, really silly, but just kind of captures the beauty of the mystery in the world. And I want to see that from you.
Nothing gets studio executives more excited than when you bring up the movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Because the dollar signs just fill the sky. It's so funny. It would make a lovely movie. I've thought in various ways. Oh my God, even like a stage play could be amazing. And that could happen too. It's right now I'm super consumed with writing the podcast, and it's because it's written, it consumes a lot of my time. That is overwhelmingly the largest chunk of work I do, is getting those scripts right. And so I haven't really leaned into that, but it could happen. The Ted Sirios thing is amazing. I'm glad you like that episode. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it involves, James Randi in a way as well. So you kind of have these, It's the great battle between the believers and the skeptics, and just this unassuming person that's just encountered something strange in the middle of that. And I just thought, wow, what a great encapsulation of everything paranormal this would be.
Well, if you have Daniel Radcliffe's phone number, send it over. I think there's a little Ted Sirios in that guy.
Well, I'll have a look. I don't think I have his number in my phone, but I'll see. He's a fellow Daniel, so who knows? Maybe that'll be enough. If you had the keys to the world, what would you do first to try and unite humanity?
What?
Yeah, it's a big one.
How dare you? I don't know, man. I think we've been talking about it. I think the best thing that's going on in our modern world are things like this, the conversation that you and I are able to have because of technology, the way we connected, what happened for you and Elena, because of that connection. There's with every new piece of technology, we're given opportunities, but we're also given responsibilities. And it always feels like it's a battle between how a new thing will get used. Will it get used to help a large number of people, or will it get co-opted and corrupted by a small amount of people? Here's the thing. And to get back to the political thing, it's so easy, especially in America right now, to feel that divide when you experience it through media. But, if I travel and I'm in a part of the country where odds are these people do not share my politics, I don't know that when I talk to them. When I talk to someone I meet on the street, or I meet in a bookstore, or I meet at a restaurant, I'm meeting a human being. And I think that if you deal with the human being in front of you, just the human being in front of you, you're going to have so much more luck than if you are trying to categorize them into a larger tribe, thereby to understand who you are in relationship to them. Deal with the human being in front of you. It can be scary. It can be strange. We don't want to deal with people, especially people we don't know. And yet I think most people, those are the most rewarding experiences you have. Oh my God, we met the greatest bartender last night. It was so much fun talking to him. And because you're just dealing with the person, and underneath politics and tribes and races and gender and sexuality and everything else, it's a human being. And are they approaching you with kindness? And are you able for a few minutes to get excited about a shared interest? That may finally be the only thing that saves us. And it's not going to save us in large masses. It's going to save us one by one.
One last bit, just so we can have it at the end of the show, just tell people kind of like where they can find you, your web address, when they can see you at the festival.
The best way to find me is on any podcast platform, Richard Hatem's Paranormal Bookshelf, or you can go to richardhatemsparanormalbookshelf.com and find everywhere where you can listen to episodes. You can find the books that we talk about. You can contact me. All of our social media and our merch is there. You can buy mugs and t-shirts and tote bags, anything to make your book buying, reading, and collecting lives more fun. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And if you can, and Dan, you're right there. You're in Virginia. Come on down to the Point Pleasant Mothman Festival in September on the weekend of the 20th and the 21st. I will be there. I'll have merch. I will be doing some sort of presentation, I guess. I might even do a live podcast somewhere in the local environs. So it's going to be a fun weekend. If you can make it down in September to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the Mothman Festival 2025, I will be there. We can all meet up in person and have some fun.
That sounds fantastic. And I'm totally going to put that in my calendar and see if we can't work that out, because that'd be great to meet you there in your first viewing.
Oh, that'd be
awesome. Yeah. Beers on me if I get to see you there, or cocktails on me, depending on, which you go for.
All right. I'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Richard. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on my show, especially after you hosting Elena and I on yours. And I'll be sure to put the link to the show
definitely.
The description and stuff like that, and just, get people over to you for promo.
Oh, fun. Okay, that's so great. And Dan, it's always good to talk to you, man.
You too.
I feel so lucky we met up.
Thank you so much for joining us as we explored time, free will, and the mysteries of alien encounters. In a world shaped by secrecy, media, and diverse cultures, it's clear that personal experience and creative curiosity are key to navigating the unknown. Whether you're an aspiring writer or a lifelong seeker, remember, it's through connection and shared stories that we bridge divide and find meaning. Keep questioning, keep creating, and above all, stay curious. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Spotify or on your chosen platform. If you could like, share, or subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. It helps us find our tribe. If you'd like to support the show and get access to a 1-hour live chat each month and early ad-free access, you can find us at Patreon. Just follow the link in the show notes or at our website, tobehumanshow.com. And feel free to reach out via the contact page or email at hello@tobehumanshow.com. You can also find us on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, or X at tobehumanshow. As always, remember to be curious. The universe is bigger than we know.
What It Means to Be Human is a double-barrel production. This week's episode was produced by Roz Mugford and Dan Zetterstrom. Sound post-production by Parker Mosley with technical support from Dale Mugford. Our theme music is by Thunderbird.